Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Pastor Danielle. I'm the lead pastor at Spark.Church, and
I'm Rabbi Chaim here. I'm the rabbi at Congregation Eitz Chaim, and I'm thrilled to see all of you here today.
We just wanted to invite you all to just kind of lean in and listen. We have an incredible opportunity this afternoon. You guys get to meet and learn and listen from someone who marched and learned and worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So this is our friend George Shinhoster. We're so excited to welcome him to our home here in the Bay Area because this last summer, Rabbi Chaim, you and I got to go with, how many was it? 45 Sparkers and Ethnics together, and we got to travel for a week through the South with George. And we had an incredible time with one another. George came of age in the civil turbulence of the 1960s. It was a little bit a while ago. And a native of Savannah, Georgia, he was one of the first African Americans. That's all right. It was just a little bit, because I was born in the 70s. Yeah, same year, I think. Yeah. He was one of the first African Americans to desegregate a high school and a college there in Savannah. So that means that where there used to be a time where only white students and only black students could go to only schools set aside for them, George was amongst the first to help bring those schools and those people together. He worked with the Chatham County Crusade for Voters to help register citizens to become voters back then. And in the heat of the civil rights struggle, Mr. Shinhoster worked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference as a field organizer. He worked in these states: Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina. And now we're going to add California to your list, George. You came and worked here in California in these days. After joining that Southern Christian Leadership Conference, George was arrested 19 times as he pursued voting rights and equal access to public accommodations for black people throughout the South. That means 19 different times George was placed in a jail simply for asking for people to be treated the same. So 19 times, and more times than that, I bet you got in trouble too. That's just the 19 times they actually put you in jail. He marched with Dr. King and experienced firsthand Dr. King's leadership and commitment and drive in the midst of the struggle. Also, really wonderfully and special gift for us this afternoon is that for 42 years, George was an executive with the YMCA in Georgia, South Carolina, Washington State, and North Carolina before retiring as president and CEO of the Newark YMCA. We also have a fun YMCA leadership person here today, YWCA, with us today. So George's leadership with students, with young people, has really set him up to be a fantastic communicator for you all today. He's a national trainer and facilitator still for the YMCA. He's president of the George Shinhoster Experience, and he continues to speak and storytell throughout the nation, preparing middle school, high school students, and young students to become leaders yourself in our communities today.
So one of the things that I love about George is his voice. And he has a beautiful voice. He has a beautiful heart. And I thought it would be good for us to warm up our voices before we hear his voice. Because one of the things that we loved to do on the trip was to sing. And that's something that Spark loves to do and Eitz loves to do. And it was something that we did on the bus. It was something that we did often on the trip. And actually we had a songbook on the trip called Together We Sing. So some of you may know the song already, and so you'll help those who don't know it. But if you know it, please sing loudly, and then we will invite George to come and use his voice to share with all of you some important lessons and stories. It's called We Shall Overcome. How many of you know it? Okay. So if you know it, please sing along. If you don't know it, you can follow along with the words. It goes like this. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. So we can come back and we can sing that at the end. But now it's our pleasure to welcome George with his beautiful voice and his big heart. Please, round of applause for George Shinhoster.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Now, you heard all of that stuff. And Pastor Danielle just took half of my speech. All of that, so what I was going to tell you about, but I'll have to wait on that. But the fact of the matter is, I am thrilled to be here today and to come and share with you a little bit about what I have learned through my journey along the Civil Rights Trail. But I want you to do one thing for me. Rabbi, I never sing "We Shall Overcome" sitting down. Then I want you, as we go back, we're going to sing that verse all over again so you can help me get into the mood for preparing to be with you. Please stand. Kevin, can you put back up "We Shall Overcome"? Got you. Thank you. Now, join hands in a crossed arm motion so that in between your two arms there should sit your heart. And then as we sing the song, thank you very much. The other hand. That's it. So what we'll sing is "We Shall Overcome," just that first verse. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Thank you very much. Now, when we are singing that song, I think we sing it a little differently every time, because as you sing it more often and you have a sense of what you're singing about, when you feel as if you're in a place and you've been struggling, you've battled, you've gone to jail those 19 times, and I start singing "We Shall Overcome," it comes from a place that still gives me the impetus to go to jail for that 20th time. Pastor Mark was something other than not doing anything wrong. So I'm gratified to be here. And what they've told me is that now, as long as I've been here, I've got all of these tasks that I have to do. And one of the things that I'm delighted to do, and I think it must be one of these things that ministers do all the time, where they have everybody sitting down, take the young people and put them in a circle and we talk to them. So, since I'm not a minister, I guess that they wanted me to act like I was one and just have some young people. And we're going to do a couple of things today. I want to talk to some of the very young who may not have experienced it yet, and just take a look at some time with some who we might go through a book with. And what this is going to do is give me the opportunity to let my nervous knees stop shaking. And so we're going to read a little book. And I don't know where the division line is, but I want to get a little group that I'm going to read a couple of stories, and it's called God's Dream. One of the people that wrote this book was Desmond Tutu. And if you have never heard of Desmond Tutu was the Archbishop in South Africa. One of the things about Desmond Tutu is that Tutu was the bishop for Nelson Mandela. And so for those of you who know nothing else about South Africa, once you go and you get there, Just step off the plane and go, "So you borna." It's like hello. It's like sayonara. It's like hi there. So you can take that and run with it. But for a few minutes, for you very young ones, I'm going to sit down right on this little floor down here. If you'll gather around, which is the way they wanted it. If you're real small, come up. Hey, come up and join me. How about it? Okay, this book is called God's Dream. And in this book, it tells a little bit about a story. And we're going to read it. It goes, "Dear child of God, what do you dream about in your loveliest dreams? Do you dream about flying high on rainbows, reaching across the sky?" Turn the page for me. You want to help me out? Do you dream about being free to do what your heart desires, or about being treated like a full person, no matter how young you might be? Do you know what God dreams about? If you close your eyes and look with your heart, I'm sure, dear child, that you will find out. God's dreams about people sharing. God dreams about people caring. God dreams that we can reach out and hold one another's hands and play with one another, games and laugh with another's heart. But God does not force us to be friends or to love one another. Dear child of God, it does not happen that we get angry and hurt one another. Soon we start to feel sad and so very alone. Sometimes we cry and God cries with us. But when we say we're sorry and forgive one another, we wipe away our tears and God's tears too. Each of us carries a piece of God's heart within us. And when we love one another, the piece of God's heart are made whole. God dreams that every one of us will see what we are all brothers and sisters. Yes, even you and me. Even if we have different mommies and different daddies or live in different faraway lands. Even if we speak different languages or have different ways of talking to God. Even if we have different eyes or different skin. Even if we're taller and I'm smaller, or even if your nose is little and mine is larger, dear child of God, do you know how to make God's dream come true? It is really quite easy. As easy as sharing, loving, caring, as easy as holding, playing, and laughing, as easy as knowing we're family because we're all God's children. Will you help God's dream come true and tell someone a secret? Tell someone you are a secret. The end. How was that? Was that good? Okay.
Thank you, George.
Thank you very much for helping me out. I want to move up in age just a little bit. What we had hoped to do would be able to talk to the young ones and then bring it up a little bit. I'm going to start off with some of you who may be a little older. I started off working, well, let me start off even backwards. My home is Savannah, Georgia. I'm on the ocean. Gorgeous weather. The humidity is high. And I grew up at a time where black folks and white folks did nothing together. Absolutely nothing. If there was a place where there was water to drink, it usually had the label black and white. It was always the big joke, how does white water taste? It must be different than the way black water tastes. It's almost like your sugar is sweeter than mine, and so we went through some of that kind of stuff. I lived at a time when you didn't look an older white person in the eye. I gave way on the sidewalk in fear of what there might be in retaliation for being on that highway and somebody else wanting to ride on it. I lived in a time where if you went to the clothing store, you couldn't go to the Gap and try on a pair of jeans. You couldn't get a pair of overalls from Sears and Roebuck. Now, see, y'all don't even know about Sears and Roebuck. That's another story. I'll tell you about how you move from good to great and what the tipping point happens. But when we look at what I did and how we went through things, there were all those things that were not equal. 1963 was kind of sort of my year. I grew up in a family where my mom and dad told us that we could be anything that we wanted to be if we would apply ourselves to being that. Well, that was good encouragement, but it was not always the best way for us to do it. So at about 15, 16, I was in high school, junior high school, and one of the principals was fired because of him trying to teach and wanting to buy a different set of books. And so a lot of us, my first protest was in that regard to try to get that principal rehired. And so as a part of the student council, we evacuated the schools and we marched downtown. What I want you to think about is that at your age, you can begin to make differences and different kind of decisions that can propel you to be a change agent. We marched. He did not get his job back. But during that same time, the 60s erupted. And there were places where we could not go to eat, places where we could not go to sleep, places where we go to try on clothing in different stores, and that was not available to us, only because the color of our skin was black. You probably won't read and did not hear that we were sometimes the first, the last to be hired, the first to be fired. When I went to a school that was segregated, which means that only white people went to that school and black people were not allowed to go to that school. We used books that came from the white school. That was during an era that was called Jim Crow, where separate but equal did not resonate at all. They were saying that the curriculums for both schools were the same. And while they were the same, I missed sometimes half of the first chapter because the books didn't have those pages in them. And I was still expected to learn and gather that information. So as young people, we began to protest those kinds of things. At about 15, we started marching on the Board of Education. We started letting our voices be heard for what it was that we wanted to have. 1960, if you've ever heard of the Freedom Riders, that was before or after we couldn't ride a bus for interstate commerce. I could not have taken a bus here and rode in the front seat and get off the bus and go inside one of those little crappy restaurants to get a hot sandwich. You could get one out of the machine, but you couldn't get a hot sandwich because black people couldn't do that. We may not have been able to go to the bathroom being on that bus. So the ills of what I went through, just trying to get along and to go along, were those kind of things that began to give me a way of saying, I've had enough of this, and to be willing to do something about that. And most of us were not more than about 15 or 16. You all probably know nothing about a little store called Crest, Woolworth, what do we call them in the day? 5 and dime stores, very popular stores. But they all had a little cafeteria in them, and we could not go in there to buy anything and sit down and expect to eat it. But young people, not much older than you were, made such a difference in how we began to change society's impact and society's outlook on what was taking place. I worked at a restaurant. I was what's called a bus boy. Do you have an idea what a bus boy is? I cleaned them tables off. I was good. I could clean a table off fast, hold that tray under this arm, wipe it down, pull the black pepper back up front real quick. And the waitresses liked to have me work in their area because they could get it filled up right quick again, and they got the tips. And I sat back and I told the guy if I was going to be able to work there, I needed to be able to have some time to do my homework. And they thought that was such a nice thing for me to do. I must be, and I had to be, a real privilege to my community. And they could see me as a real asset because I was so interested in doing my schoolwork. So one day, as I talked to you all about school, I, along with 17 other people, decided to desegregate the schools in Savannah, Georgia. I went to school for 9 months with a police escort to school and to every class. I went to what's called ROTC. That was the reason I had to give for being able to go to that school. For those of you who are not so familiar with ROTC, one of the times I went to jail at Groves High School because I excited a riot. I did not have a big thought about nonviolence in those times. And going to that school, I don't know where my police escort was, but we were on what's called the parade field. I'm in full dress. I love to shine a pair of shoes. I scuffed my shoes before I came in here. I felt real bad about not having that shine intact. And I used that brasso, and I took that brasso. My brass was shining. My stuff on my lapels was all in order. And my company guy walks up, puts his finger, after he licks his finger, sticks it on my belt, and told me I had a demerit because my brass was not clean and not in place. For that, I had to run in full gear. An M16 with a full pack is just over 15, 16 pounds. And I'm supposed to run around the parade field. So my rebellion was to say to him that you did that. My brass was always intact. And he wanted to know whether or not I was calling him a liar. And I said, no, but I'm telling you the truth. I didn't do it. You did it. And from that, he proceeded to take loose his belt. And from where I grew up, it told me that something was about to jump off. So I looked for the other black boy that was in the parade field. And I stepped back, and he took his shirt open, and I hit him where I grew up. He, by doing that, became the aggressor. I shouldn't have done it, probably. But I hit him. The whole parade field converged on us. We took belts loose. You know the rest. We wrap them around your hand and go back to back. What I learned where I grew up, and my instincts were there. All I wanted to do was keep them off. So they locked us up for inciting a riot. We went to school a couple of days later after my dad told me about the power of perseverance. And I said, what did you want me to do? That's always the question. What do you want me to do in that kind of instance? He said to me simply, what's our objective for being there? What is it that we want to gain by you coming to this school? Did you think that that was a good idea? And I learned a long time, I don't talk back to my daddy, but since he asked me a direct question, I said, at the time, I thought it was a good idea. But it taught me a lesson that sometimes we have to look at what we want the end game to be rather than doing something that's going to cut that short. So at Groves High School, I would have been in my class prior to that. I was in the top 10 of that class, in that top 10%. I wasn't the brightest bulb at Sophronia Tompkins High School, but the rest of them going to have to run hard to beat me. I got at Groves High School. I, to this day, don't know anybody that was there. None of them. Never been back for anything. And they have never asked me back either. My brother, who was a college administrator, he had some of them who were there, and it was the irony that they began to work for my brother. So here I am, sitting with a teacher, and first F I ever made. I made that F. My daddy told me, "Why did you take all of those classes?" You know, back in those days, we had what's called college prep classes. The college prep classes were aimed at me taking classes that said I was going to college. I'm taking biology, advanced algebra, and trig all in the same year, which meant I had to study a bunch. And I couldn't do anything to make this lady think that I could do anything. I was a loser to begin with. My dad told me that in spite of them, what is your objective? So when you go to school, what is it that you look to get out of that? You have to begin to look at what your purpose is, what your objective is, what you're all about. But being your age, you have the capacity to bring about change, and you have a power to do things that you have no idea that could be done. In what we call my quest for equality, I learned a whole lot about myself. I learned a whole lot about things that I would be able to do and things that I could get done. So my encouragement to you, or my thoughts to you, is to be the best you that you can be. And you don't let anybody dissuade you from having your dream. If I were to tell you one thing, I want you to take a look at 5 P's. The first of those 5 P's is passion. And let me switch that. The first of your 5 P's is purpose. What is your purpose? Why do you do what you do? What is your passion? What makes you feel good about doing it? The third would be perseverance. What are you willing to put into it to get out of it what you want to have to get out of it? Then fourth, you want to have peers. Now I'm going to deviate on y'all right now. Peers is all about who you surround yourself with. Warren Hamilton got me in the most stuff. And I found that I was doing more that Warren Hamilton wanted to do than what I wanted to do. So with peers, my deviation for you is a song that's in your songbook. That song is Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. And when you're not going to let anybody turn you around, you go back up to your purpose. And I'm serious about what it is that I'm doing, so my passion will prevent me from getting there. My peers will not make me lose sight on what it is that I want to get done. And lastly, when I look at what that perseverance talk about, I am ready to do what it takes to meet my end and make that begin to happen. So now y'all don't have to stand up. But I do want y'all to help a brother out. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. I want you to think in terms of things that you feel so good about, so much passion about. We have young people now who doesn't want to make an A because their friends don't make A's. I got people now that I know. My son wanted to go to a school. He went to the University of Maryland to play football. I wanted him to go to an HBCU, Winston-Salem State. His mama got weak on him. I don't know why. She just got weak. Then I had to go change up on him. Number one, you don't walk on to a D1 school who has given out all of its scholarships and you want me to pay. That was a parental move. They said, nope, you go to Winston-Salem, you can run track and you can get a scholarship and you're good at it. And they have an excellent program of computer science. So now that's his forte. But the whole thing of that, he wanted to go because the quarterback, and he said that they had synergy. Boy, I tell you what synergy is. Now, I know this might not be the kind of parenting y'all are used to, but synergy is what happens if he breaks a leg and they don't throw to you. But the long story short, if you can take a look at those P's and put them in place for you, where you're going to be able to make a difference there. Civil rights is not over. And let me just say to you all that those things that I did, freedom ain't free. I'm not all right, y'all. My life changed tremendously doing what I did. What would I have done? Got no idea. I probably was going to wind up being that physical therapist that I didn't tell y'all about, because when I played football at Sophronia Tompkins High School, I got racked up. My mama put an end to that. My mom came to a football game. I was a receiver and a quarterback. They had an end-around tackle. Pastor Mark, I came around that end, and I looked like Shaquan Barkley. I ran around that end, and I was running. Somebody hit me high, somebody hit me low. I went one way, the ball went another way. The only thing what Coach said was, Shinhoster, why did you lose the ball? My mama said, that's it. I was ashamed as I could be. When your mama run out of the stands at a high school football game to get her baby off that field, I said, Mama, I'm all right. I'm all right. The boys still laugh at me. But my mama came out there, and I wanted to be a physical therapist after that, Ted, because she was not going to let me play any more football. But I would have been a physical therapist had I not gotten involved in the movement. But the way the movement has changed my life, there's a book and a song called Wouldn't Take Nothing for My Journey Now. My whole purpose for wanting to talk to you is that don't judge me simply on the fact of the color of my skin. When you see me, I want you to find a way when you talk to your friends. Who was George Shinhoster? What did he say? How did he look? The first thing I want you to say about me, he was a man that tried to sing and he couldn't hold a key. That works. The last thing I want you to say about me is that I was black. Now don't forget and don't think for 1 minute that I'm ashamed of my color. I am not. But I'm more than the color of my skin. Martin Luther King said that one day I have a dream that my 4 little black children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Find a better way to describe who your friends are rather than their color, their ethnicity, or something else. Find a way to say it that's the last thing that comes to mind. Now if you don't say anything else, just say he's a man with a lot of gray hair. But for you young people, my granddaughter told me, said, Poppy, you have a TWA. I said, a TWA? What is a TWA? A teeny weeny afro. I'm going to keep up with my jargons from the city, but that's fine to have a teeny-weeny afro, and you remember me for that. But just something else. Just think about who you are, and to your own self, be true. To your own self, begin to take a look and a listen at how you want to be seen, how you want to be recognized, and what that does. Let me jump a little bit, because I've kind of gone and I want to tell you a little more about my journey and just share with you a little bit about what makes me me and what made me say all of that to you. You know, Brother Mark got all of this stuff. When you take a look at it, here I am, 17 years old, and I went to jail while I was doing this. I worked at this restaurant. The day after I worked at this restaurant and went to high school, I turned around, picketed the restaurant because I could not eat in that restaurant. So I was out there and I picketed that restaurant. 17. And I was leading a group. Here I was with my piece of Antons. I was here in the back corner. Do you see me there? You probably couldn't recognize me. I was on my way to looking good at that age. I had on my brother's sweater. Do you all know what it was like when your brother left for school before you did and you always wanted to wear his nice sweater? You all are too young to know what English leather was, but I took my brother's sweater, and that picture was on the news where we took people to begin to register to vote. And we registered people to vote that day. A very inspiring feeling. That next week, I led a group in a place called Allendale, South Carolina. And I had 4 women, all above 80 years old, that myself and my team, we took those people to Allendale and took them up to the courthouse. You all who perhaps have not visited the South very much, there are very stately buildings in the South. A lot of steps to go up to the courthouse. And I had these women that I was helping up the steps. And the sheriff came out and told me that I was an outside agitator. And being an outside agitator, I was the one that caused the Negroes in that town to act the way that they were acting. At that point in time, another one hit me upside my head with something, and they dragged me down all those steps, locked me up in Allendale, South Carolina. Freedom ain't free. It was paid with blood, sweat, and tears. But my joy and my redemption was on the faces of those women who got to register to vote. Let me ask you, young man, MVLA, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? How many bubbles are in a bar of soap, Ansel? Good answer, but that's wrong. That was one of the questions that was asked to see if you were going to be able to register to vote. Had a gallon jar filled with marbles. How many marbles are in the jar? You know, and predicated on that, predicated on your answer, which was never going to be right, you were either allowed to vote or not. I went to a little place called the Highlander School. Work with a group to start talking about how we deal and help seniors who wanted to vote. We even tried to answer some of those questions. We want you to interpret the first article in the Constitution. Okay, what is that? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's wrong. Now, do you think they had a scoreboard for that? Nope. And you were not allowed to register to vote. Every one of the gains that were made through these struggles came under attack. So about the time they allowed things to happen, there was something in place to deter them from coming to fruition. The way that I got to Groves High School in 1963 all began in 1954. Brown versus the Board of Education. The Supreme Court had to say that separate but equal was no longer the law of the land. And what did the school board in Savannah, Georgia do? They desegregated the schools at the 12th grade. Why? Oh, 12th grade for me, as a rising senior, I could see it. There were not very many people. Many of you made decisions, as did I, when I needed to move and my children were in 11th grade or 12th grade. I wouldn't take a good job until my child got out of school, let alone one of them talking about something as foolish as going to a white school, you know. And so here I was doing something that was, all of us did something that was very much undoable, unthinkable, took on a whole life of its own. There were 12 people at the other school. 4 of them graduated. One was an attorney. He became an attorney. And you may have heard of the pipe bombings that went off. His name is Robbie Robinson. Robbie Robinson's office was blown up, and he was killed in Savannah, Georgia. Freedom ain't free, and the phone bill just keeps on coming. Okay. But you know, that price for freedom was one that is exacted on a regular basis. It took almost 11 years for that to happen. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of Dred Scott and the Dred Scott decision. Let me get you all to think about it, especially you young people. Read some. Study some. Just check out things. But for 12 years, Dred Scott thought that he was on track to winning his freedom. As he sought to win his freedom, the Supreme Court told him that they couldn't do that because the law of the land said that Dred Scott was not a human, he was property. And he was listed on the roster, the same as that man listed the number of cattle that he had. So I just say that as we look at what happened and what is out there on us and for us and to us, don't get deterred, because as you look at it, it's going to take time. And you would say that all this stuff happened in 1960s. And if you can see similarities as to what is happening today, we got to take a look at what that means. The prices that were exacted for this thing called freedom can be a resonant of the drumbeat and the heartbeat of people like Jimmy Lee Jackson. Jimmy Lee Jackson was a former soldier who was in Marion, Alabama, who was shot down because the police were pushing his grandmother and grandfather. Jimmy Lee Jackson provided the impetus for the march from Selma to Montgomery. Along with that, there was the death of Viola Liuzzo, a white woman who had come from Detroit and left 5 children at home because of her conviction for what was happening and looking for a way to make a change. Viola Liuzzo was driving down the highway, shot and killed in her car on Highway 50 between Selma and Montgomery as she transported people back and forth. Then there was the Reverend James Reeb, a Unitarian minister who had come down to work after Dr. King was asking for Turnaround Tuesday, where there were ministers who had come down to be a part of what happened. James Reeb was a man who decided that he was going out to eat. He and several other ministers walked down the street ill-advised, and he was beaten to death with a baseball bat. Freedom ain't free. And I said that these were white people because I want you to know that all throughout the movement, there were people of goodwill who were a part of that. And so as I stand here today in a synagogue and talk about who was out there and voices, I have to talk about Rabbi Heschel. You can go back to 1960 in New York City, and then you can come all the way up to his role of activism at the March on Washington. Rabbi Heschel was one to speak out early and speak out strongly about what had to take place. Evil can only be triumphant when men of goodwill decide to do nothing. I want to suggest that some of us need to become drum majors. And if you know about drum majors, or if you don't know, I want y'all to turn on college football one day and watch one of those schools like Grambling. They're marching 125 from Florida A&M. That other 150 out of southern Louisiana. And you watch that drum major who could lift those knees high. That's age there. That was the best I could do. But who could lift those knees high, march strong. Drum majors are out front. Drum majors are directing. Martin Luther King said to tell people that I was a drum major. I was somebody who decided to get out in front of the crowd and do something. Somebody who would go out and move in a very different way to bring about change. Somebody who would put self in the back seat and let others be their greater. There's a little prayer. Lord, let me live from day to day in such a self-forgetful way that even when I kneel to pray, let my prayer be for others. Others, Lord, yes, others. Let this my motto be. Help me to live for others, that I might live like thee. Sometimes we've got to do something not because it affects us only, me and my foe and no more. We're going to do it because it's going to make the entire community that much better. We've got to find a way that there's somebody who's going to be willing to take the charge, be willing to go out, stand in front of the crowd, be willing to do something very much different. There's another piece that Martin Luther King said, and I want you to think about this one a little differently. And what he said was that the measure of a man is not what he does in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. It's easy to do good when there ain't nothing that's going to bother you, when there's not going to be any cost to you for doing it. But when you put yourself at risk, I want you to begin to think about having the strength to love. And if you read that book, Love Dries Up Hate. Love is able to make violence succeed. You got to find a way that you're going to be willing to get in the way and do something different. I've been involved in the movement for a long time. And what I want you to think about now is my driving force. I have 4 children. 3, 4. Let me count all of them. I have 5 grandchildren. I have 5 great-grandchildren. This is my crew. This is my passion. That's my purpose. On this end, that's my youngest great-grandson. I want there to be a better world for him. I want him to have opportunities that I didn't. I want him to be one who's going to take that mantle and go out there and run the ball. On this other end is my great-grandson as well. And Liam is on the spectrum, and I have to learn a little different how to deal with that. But he and I are tight. We're close. And if you have one that was born and you saw more tubes than you saw baby at birth, the ability to love that child unconditionally comes even greater. So now that's my man there. My others, I did the best I could with them. But here I stand with my breed. And you see my little man and his head sticking in there? We just go for it. On this corner with his little peace sign hanging down. Today is my great-grandson's birthday. He turns 9. Rabbi, as I was telling you, the difference in that is that he was born 3 days before his grandmother passed. It's the kind of memorial that you don't want, and we're finding a different way to be. But I look at it now, and I say, in the words of yet another song, I wouldn't take nothing for my journey now. Peace and power. Thank you so much. But we have a commitment to the other part of that song. Are we ready now? And now the other thing we do is that in the song, it's not a song. You know, you see some folks when they sing, they just stand there. I want you to sway. And just move with it. We shall overcome, my Lord. We shall overcome, my Lord. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, don't you know that I do believe we shall overcome someday. Now, one of these times I'm going to come back here again, and with a lot more vigor than this group. Y'all don't believe it. You have to feel that we're going to overcome. You know, one of the things that happened, before I go to this next verse, one of the things that happened is that there are a lot of folks that after 1964, voting rights, 1965 was the Public Accommodations Act. We got the chance to eat in restaurants, sleep in hotels, go and do a lot of stuff. 1965 was the Voting Rights Act with all of those people who were beaten on the bridge. And a lot of us thought that we had made it. They came out of that whole experience living in the illusion of inclusion. But we were not there yet. We were not done. There was a whole lot of work left to do, as there is now. So when I sing these songs, I sing them in the spirit of the gains. I sing them in the spirit of what yet is the gain. In the words of young people, you know, y'all old folks got to get lit. And if y'all get lit, no, I ain't talking about y'all going out there and tying one on. But I am talking about you get lit, get excited, get involved, get engaged, and do something. And then you got to stay woke.
Yeah.
I know it's the buzzword of the day, but you got to stay woke. Rumpelstiltskin talked about sleeping through the revolution. And if we don't get woke, we got ourselves a real problem. Now, the next verse goes, we're not alone. Now, let's do this one. God is on our side, okay? God is on our side, my Lord. God is
on our side,
my Lord.
God
Is on our side today. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Was that another verse?
I said God is on our side every day.
Every day. Every day. He didn't stop just because we got 24 in this day. He picks it right up and keeps it going. Okay.
Thank you all so much. George, thank you so much. Round of applause.